Now that the bundle adjust has completed its process, you can see that the skew line is straight now versus wavy as it was before. And I'm taking a lot of this information from this tutorial from Colin Levy's tutorials. So make sure you do watch those. You'll gain a little bit more information. But these tutorials are specifically for this 3D motion class and working with Cinema 4D. So after we've got that completed and we're happy with the way the lines look, now we want to adjust our coordinate plane. So again, go up to View, make sure Ground Plane is selected, and then make sure you have the word Coordinate Frame highlighted. And once you have that highlighted, you can hold down Option now and actually move this frame around. And our job is to try and find a location in the video where we feel things are really stable. This is the spot in the video where I'm going to focus on the most, having my 3D objects in the scene. So I'm just going to come in here. You can hold down Option. You can rotate this left and right. You hold down Option and Command. You can rotate it in all directions. And what we want to do is to enlarge this. So I'm going to keep rotating this around using Option and the buttons on the mouse. Middle button is going to scale it up. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this up so it's encompassing my view. And now I want to Command Option, left mouse button, rotate this plane in space, and angle it up and down until it's lining up almost exactly with the plane in my view. Okay, so I'm looking at the lines on the plane and lining them up with the lines in my image. You can see it's lined up with the wall here, it's lined up with the coffee machine, it's lined up with the crack, and it's lined up with the stove pretty well. So I feel pretty confident right now that that is the plane I want to work on top of. So this is something you can play around with a lot. Something I'm not happy with is the fact that it's not lined up with the front of the countertop and the back of that wall. So now I'm going to rotate this again left and right until I get that angle lined up. So I'm looking at the back wall and I'm looking at the front plane of the countertop right now and trying to make those work together. And this image may have a little bit of distortion because of the camera that I used. So I'm just going to try, especially for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to try and get it as close as I possibly can. Paying special attention to the area that I want to have my 3D object in, which is this area right here. So that's the most important area to me right now. So the grid on the ground should make sense. You know, it should look like it's existing and going off into the horizon in 3D space. So that's what you're really shooting for. And that's starting to look pretty good to me. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at that. Go with that. So you may want to fine-tune this a little bit more or less, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so that's pretty close. Once I get to that point, now I want to save my file. So I do have a folder set up on my desktop. And I'll just call this Kitchen Match. And that's just saving the Icarus file into a format that could be reopened. One thing to keep in mind though is, for whatever reason, and this is a little bit outdated software and is open source, free, available for you to use, or not open source, but it's free to use for educational purposes. So there are a few glitches. One thing that it does do is, if you save it and open it back up, you're going to lose the bundle adjust. So if you open this file back up, if your computer crashes now and you need to open it back up, you're going to have to rerun your bundle adjust. Everything else should be saved though. From here, what we want to do is export our 3D motion. So it's Project, Export 3D Motion. We're working with Cinema 4D, and you can see that Cinema 4D is not an option in here. But Cinema will open a Lightwave file really well. So We're just going to save this as a Lightwave file, and we'll call it Kitchen Match. Go ahead and save it. And just to be thorough, I'm also going to save an After Effects 5.5 file. And this will bring in the 3D data to After Effects so that you could use cameras to work in 3D space in After Effects. But I want to use some of the advantages of working in Cinema 4D, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we've got our project saved out. And now we can simply switch to Cinema 4D. I'm going to go ahead and leave this open just in case there's something I want to change later on. But I'm going to go ahead and switch to Cinema, which is not open. So I'll go down here, Cinema 4D. So I'm using release 12. Release 13 is currently out, but since that's what we have in our classrooms right now, release 12, that's what I will use. So I'm simply going to open the Lightwave scene. File open, open the Lightwave scene. It's going to ask me about scale. That's fine, I don't care. And what you're going to see when you get into your scene is that your camera is now selected, and you have all of these points in space. And if I scrub through my timeline, and you see it's also adjusted the length for me to match the length of my animation, you can see I'm actually moving through space, and those points exist at the same location as the objects in my scene. So this is the wonder and beauty of working with this match-moving software, is it actually matches your camera and creates a 3D camera for you that matches that image. I like to be able to see the movie that I was working with in the background. So I'm going to set my scene up the way I would like it to be and make sure the frames per second are matching, all of that. Let's just go to screen. And my output settings for the renderer, I'm going to choose 1080p, and we'll do, there should be a 1080p 24. That should work. I can change the frames per second to match my video, which is 23.76, I believe. To double check that. Window, movie inspector, 23.98. Okay, that was off. 23.98. 24 would probably work fine too. And apparently Cinema wants to use 24, so we'll do that. And I want to make sure the aspect ratio is correct. At the end here, I want to use my 1080p resolution video footage in After Effects to composite everything. So I'm going to go ahead and set my scene up for 1080p, even though I'm going to load in 640p movie. So what I want to do is create a material that includes my video as the color source. So let's turn off everything else like specular and just look at the color channel on here. I'm going to go to Texture, Load Image, find my 480p video, open it, and that's going to load that in. And the next thing I want to look at is the animation. So if you double click on the image, you'll see a tab next to shader called Animation. So just click Calculate just to double check that it's doing things right. It's seeing the movie frame rate as 23. I want it to be 24. And I want it to match the timing of our frames. So now what we're going to do is use that video as the background object. So I'm just going to go in here and make a background object and drag this video onto that background object. And now when I scrub through, I should see my animation, and it should be the same frame rate. And you should see the points aligning in space with the objects, just as we did before in Icarus. So it's looking pretty good. I'm looking at the corner that I chose for my origin, and it's staying right on the edge of the coffee or espresso machine. The ground plane looks pretty good. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. I want to make sure my camera is protected so I can't mess that up. Add a protection tag to that. And I really don't need these points anymore, but they may be helpful, so I'll just go ahead and leave them in there. They won't render, they're simply null objects. So if I render my frame right now, I'm just going to get an image of my video From here, I can build my 3D scene. So I'll go ahead and start doing that, and that'll be in the next video.